going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Underdog Podcast. Really excited to bring you this video today. It's coming a little bit later than I wanted to. I was in Florida last week for spring break, hanging out with my friends, so I'm really excited to bring this video to you today. Today we're doing a free agency recap for the AFC. The NFC edition will be coming out tomorrow, but I'm really excited to do this. There's a lot of big moves that happened. And so I will be doing the moves that have been so far through March 21st. This is coming out tomorrow, March 22nd. So if there's any big moves on that day, I will not cover them. I will cover them in a future video, which, would be like Baker Mayfield trade, Jimmy G trade, and any other big signings like Tyrann Mathieu and Teron Armstead, stuff like that. So how this is going to work is we're going to go AFC East to West, starting from 4th place to 1st place. And then we will do the NFC tomorrow. So today we are going to be starting with the New York Jets. So the Jets made a bunch of moves, and a lot of them I really liked. They brought back Joe Flacco as kind of that veteran guy in the quarterback room. Solid signing. I mean, Joe Flacco's, past what he used to be, but good veteran there, good veteran presence in that quarterback room. They re-signed Tevin Coleman. As kind of that wide zone offense that they run there, that Shanahan scheme. Wasn't super productive last year. He's getting older, but, he got him cheap, so not a bad deal. Bring back Braxton Barrios as that slot as they let Jamison Crowder go, who ended up signing in Buffalo. Really like Braxton Barrios, former New England Patriots draft pick. Really was productive last year, has some speed. I like him kind of next to Elijah Moore because Elijah Moore can play outside, and then they also have Corey Davis. They'll be looking to bolster that receiver room, and they bolstered the tight end room here with Tyler Conklin, who had a solid season playing for the injured Irv Smith Jr., and CJ Uzomah, who was a big part of that Bengals run to the Super Bowl. Was really surprised he left Cincinnati, and they got him, at market value. $8 million is not terrible for a tight end of his caliber. I just don't think Uzomah's a real good high upside player. He's a very solid floor. He's going to get you 4 to 6 catches a game for 40 to 60 yards, and maybe a touchdown here and there, but definitely a huge upgrade to that tight end room. Then along the offensive line, they bring back Connor McDermott, ironically another former Patriot draft pick. Solid guy, very versatile, can play tackle or guard. And they bring in Laken Tomlinson, who is one of, I think, the more underrated signings in this free agency period. Laken's a really good starter. Has been really good for the 49ers. I think it's a great pickup for the Jets. So you have Vera Tucker at left guard. You play him at right guard. McGovern at center, who's not bad. And then hopefully you have Mekhi Becton and then maybe somebody coming in at right tackle. But, that's a decent looking O-line for the Jets. Really solid pickup there, and Laken Thompson really liked him. They re-signed Nathan Shepard, who's a rotational guy at D-line. They signed Jacob Martin at edge. He's kind of this weird hybrid player. I'm not the biggest Jacob Martin guy, but, throwing a dart in there at edge always can, come in and help. And then the secondary, which I think was their biggest weak point. They signed DJ Reed to a $33 million deal, which is solid. Zone cover guy, fits their scheme. Decent year last year in Seattle, but again, he didn't really have a lot around him in terms of guys that could actually play, except for outside of probably Quandre Diggs. So if they get more pieces around him, we'll see how he plays. But I like DJ Reed for this scheme a lot. It's a great scheme fit, and I think he's a very underrated player. Jordan Whitehead coming over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another solid get. He's a thumper, hard-hitting safety, going to be really good against the run. And then LaMarcus Joyner, who I hope they put at free safety, even though they have Ashton Davis, because that's his best position. The Raiders tried to use him at slot corner, and it just didn't really work. I could see him playing there as well because they're very weak at corner, but it's probably going to be DJ Reed, Bryce Hall, and then potentially another guy in the draft. But nonetheless, a solid free agency for the Jets. So now we move to the Miami Dolphins. You bring in Teddy Bridgewater to either be a backup or a starter. It's really confusing, whether or not they're going to start Teddy or Tua. Tua's the guy, but if you ask me, who's a better quarterback, it's Teddy Bridgewater, so it's going to be very interesting to see kind of that battle, I guess, through training camp, if there even is one, because I don't think they've named the starter. And Teddy Bridgewater, he was asked about it in an interview, and he said, I don't really want to talk about that. So very interesting to see what they do there at quarterback. Then they bring in 2 running backs. Raheem Mostert really makes sense, as Mike McDaniel was the former OC in San Francisco. Raheem Mostert absolutely fits that wide zone stretch offense. I mean, to a T. It's just whether or not he can really stay healthy. And Chase Edmonds, I thought was a really good deal for them, as he had a really good last 2 years in Arizona. He's really shifty. He's great with the ball in his hands. Great receiving back. It's going to push Myles Gaskin down the dart, but it's a massive upgrade. I think Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert will be a nice 1-2 punch in Miami that genuinely probably had one of the worst running games in the NFL last season. And then Alec Ingold as that fullback position is very important for this offense. He's not as versatile as Juszczyk, but I would say he's probably a better blocker than him. Then they bring in a receiver. They re-signed Preston Williams, who's kind of been pushed to the back end of the depth chart after having a really impressive rookie season. Injuries have been really the thing that's kept him from really reaching his potential, but I really like him. He's kind of very similar to Devontae Parker, but a little bit different. I think he's a little bit more verticality, and he's not as physical and a better route runner than Devontae Parker, in my opinion. And then Trent Sherfield, former 49er, another guy bringing in there that's very familiar with the system. He's probably not going to contribute a ton, but just a familiar face to have in there. And then Cedric Wilson, who they steal from the Dallas Cowboys. I think I missed this move somewhere because I don't remember him signing here, but this is a great pickup. I really like Cedric Wilson. He's got some nice speed. He's a really good route runner, and you can do a lot of things with him that Mike McDaniel will really like. And then Mike Sicki, who was franchise tagged. Again, really solid tight end. He's really more of a receiver than a tight end, as he's really split out more than he ever is inline, but great to retain him because he was probably their best offensive weapon last year outside of Jalen Waddle. And then they bring in Connor Williams at guard, which was a great deal, and it wasn't very expensive. They're hoping to also land Teron Armstead, but Connor Williams definitely upgrades that guard position, as he'll play left guard, and then Robert Hunt. And if you can get Teron Armstead, that offensive line is starting to come together. Obviously, you need to fill center and right tackle, but that's a good signing nonetheless. They re-signed Emanuel Agbo, who in my opinion is one of the most underrated defenders in the league. He's a very, very good edge rusher. Kind of had a down year last year, but he's great against the run and as an edge rusher. Really like that re-sign. And then they re-signed some linebackers / edge pieces in Duke Riley, Landon Roberts, and Brennan Scarlett, who all play different roles. Duke Riley's kind of more that sideline-to-sideline guy. Landon Roberts is that thumper in the middle as they're keeping that Patriot-style defense. And then Brennan Scarlett's kind of your hybrid guy that's, can rush the passer, can cover, and defend the run. Then we have the New England Patriots, who have not done a lot in free agency, to my, annoyance, but the moves they have made, some of them I've really liked. Bringing back Brian Hoyer, obviously, Hoyer's been around a long time, and, serves as that veteran guy in the room. I think, he's a really good backup, good mentor for Mac Jones and Jarrett Stidham in that room. They bring in Ty Montgomery, who I think he's at this point really a poor man's James White. He probably can serve on that team. Probably his best use would be special teams as like a kick returner or something like that. A decent deal. I mean, I don't mind it for sure. But I just wonder if he's even going to make the team with kind of that loaded running back room. They bring back James White, which I was so happy about. I mean, missing James White last year was a real big reason why I think this offense kind of struggled. James just does a lot well, and he was really having a really good start of the season. One of the best pass catchers in the league, underrated with the ball in his hands. He's in a phenomenal teammate as well. Been a captain, I think, the last 2 years. And then the big move that they made, at least like signing wise, they re-signed Trent Brown. Massive piece that they brought back because their offensive line was kind of in shambles before they did this. With Trent Brown in, they averaged like a half yard more rush per rush, which is insane. That one player makes that much difference, but Trent Brown really does make that difference. He is a mauler in there. in the run game. And then they re-signed James Ferentz, who's kind of just, sticking around, I guess, from Bill Belichick's connection to Kirk Ferentz. They bring back Juwan Bentley, which I really liked. Really improved a lot in coverage last year. Really good against the run, our leading tackler. He's not very fast. He's not a big sideline guy, but he does play that middle linebacker thumper role very, very well. So I'm excited he's back. Then they acquired Mack Wilson in a trade, which was really interesting. I think Mack could serve as a nice will, where he's playing more sideline to sideline. He's decent in coverage, good against the run, can do a lot of things. He's just not great as a blitzer. So I wonder how they're going to use Mack Wilson. I'm very intrigued by that. Bring in a veteran in Terrence Mitchell at the cornerback position after they let J.C. Jackson walk, and Terrence Mitchell's played a lot of systems. He's played a lot of games. He's a nice veteran corner. He's not very good upside, but he's a good floor player to have and is not like the worst option to have out there at cornerback. I'd take him over Juwan Williams any day of the week, so at least we're not going to have Juwan out there starting as our other outside corner. He re-signed Devin McCourty. Phenomenal player. Very smart, very intelligent. Still can run at 33, 34 years old, whatever he is. One of my favorite players in the league. Ecstatic to have him back. Nick Folk and Matthew Slater, two pivotal special teamers, coming back as well. Nick Folk has been one of the best kickers in the league, and Matthew Slater's made like 10 straight Pro Bowls or something like that, so that's crazy. Then the Buffalo Bills, they signed Matt Barkley to a deal as a veteran in that room, and they also traded for Case Keenum, which was really interesting. So they get their backup quarterback solidified after Mitch Trubisky heads to Pittsburgh. They signed Duke Johnson, who's kind of like that Matt Breida replacement, as kind of more of that, pass catching back, which they don't really have. Singletary's not great at that, and Zach Moss is more your power back. They re-signed Jay Kumaro, who's a, depth receiver. They re-signed Isaiah McKenzie, who torched the Patriots, and then he's been, a nice like kick returner for them and a nice like matchup guy for them as well. They bring in O.J. Howard, which I was like, is Buffalo just going to get everybody? I mean, O.J. Howard's kind of been stashed in Tampa the last 2 years after tearing his ACL and then not really playing a lot last year. So phenomenal guy to take a flyer on. Roger Saffold, again, another great signing, who got cut by the Titans, has started a lot of games. Really good run blocker and an even better pass blocker. Re-signing Mitch Morse, their center, was a great move. They bring back Shaq Lawson, which I'm not really a big fan of because I'm not really a big Shaq Lawson guy, and they already have Greg Rousseau. And they have Boogie Basham, who they drafted. I just don't really see a point in Shaq Lawson coming in. Daquan Jones and Tim Settle, two really good guys against the run, and Tim Settle's probably one of the most underrated signings as well. He's been stashed in Washington and is going to be a really big factor for them, I think, next season. Hopefully he breaks out. Really like Tim Settle. Super underrated guy, especially against the run. He's phenomenal. Jordan Phillips is another guy that they threw in there at IDL. And then one that broke the bank, Von Miller, 6 years, $120 million. Absolutely, I could not believe the number on the contract. I mean, but if you're the Bills, the contract itself is an overpay, but if you're the Bills, it's not, because it's the one piece you need to really win a championship. Absolutely phenomenal move by the Bills to just bring in Von Miller. This is the one piece that they really needed that they did not have last season, and that is a big, big, big move for the Buffalo Bills. So now on to the AFC North with the Ravens. 4-1s really quick. Patrick Ricard, they re-signed. One of the better fullbacks in the league. Morgan Moses, another underrated deal. This dude's played like 900 snaps every year, and he's been above average every year. Probably a top 12 right tackle in the league. So really good. He's going to be an upgrade over Villanueva, and I'm drawing a blank on who else they had there last year, but really good move by the Ravens. They bring in Michael Pierce to bolster their run defense, and then they sign Marcus Williams, who is my dude, man. Marcus Williams, been one of the most underrated guys in the league. Played on the tag, I think, the last 2 years, if not just last year. But Marcus Williams is a ball hawk, dude. He's going to come in here next to Chuck Clark, play that free safety role, and play it really well. I'm really excited to see him in a Raven uniform. He's just like the epitome of a Raven for me, dude. He's tough. He covers really well. And I'm really excited to see what he does as a Raven. Then we have the Cleveland Browns. And let's talk the Deshaun Watson trade. So my first reaction was, wow, he's going to Cleveland? Really? I just because the burn was bridged with Cleveland and then Carolina was out. So it was literally Atlanta or New Orleans, and I thought he was going to Atlanta. And then I see he goes to Cleveland, and I'm like, what in the world is going on? And then I saw what they gave up, and it was 3 firsts, a third, and a fourth now. And they get Watson in a fourth, or in a fifth. And I think they're giving up another fourth as well. I think that was reported by Scherff today. They're giving up a 2024 fourth. And I was like, what in the world? And then I saw his contract was fully guaranteed, and I was like, this is so bad. My stance on Deshaun Watson, I think Mr. Schwartz put this really, really well, is if he did do this, there's no way he should ever play in the league again. But if he didn't do this, and I have a hard time believing he didn't do it just because of the amount of allegations against him, then he should be allowed to play. But I think he's going to get suspended no matter what because they just don't know. He's currently on the commissioner's exempt list, so he can't play anyways. He can't practice or be at the facility. So I think he's going to get suspended at minimum 4 games and most likely 6 or 8, which I think is fair. So then that's why they signed Jacoby Brissett to come in there and start potentially if Deshaun Watson's not going to play. I cannot believe Cleveland did not give up a player. I cannot believe Kareem Hunt is not a Texan. I cannot believe somebody on defense isn't a Texan. I just can't believe they didn't give up anybody besides picks. I mean, and they gave up a lot. Don't get me wrong, but I thought it was kind of going to be similar to the Russell Wilson deal where there's going to be a couple players involved, but there wasn't. So that was, Deshaun Watson, when healthy, he's a top 4 quarterback in the league because Brady's back. I honestly think he's better than Josh Allen right now when he's healthy. I mean, 2020 Deshaun Watson was incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. And he's I think I saw this on First Take. Dan Orlovsky said it. He's the only quarterback that didn't have over 4,500 yards and a 70% completion percentage to not make the Super Bowl, let alone the playoffs, the Super Bowl, and his team was 4-12. I mean, dude, Deshaun is a special football player, man. He really is. I'll be excited to watch him play football, but it's going to be hard to root for him, especially with the allegations against him. And that's all I'm going to say about Deshaun. Then they get Amari Cooper, who's probably really happy that Deshaun is throwing on the ball and not Baker Mayfield. No offense to Baker lovers, but it's true. Amari Cooper is a special player. He's been struggling in Dallas. I think, he's been injured a little bit. He's kind of been quiet on road games, but I really do believe in Amari's talent. I mean, when he came out of Alabama, he was the expectation with him were through the roof, and he's kind of, been hit or miss on those expectations, but I expect him to succeed here in Cleveland. He's a phenomenal route runner. Really, he's one of them, probably the most underrated route runner in the league. He's probably top 5 in that category. Phenomenal hands. He kind of had the drops early and has kind of gotten over that. And when Amari is on his best game, he's one of the best in the league. They signed Jakeem Grant, who I think is an underrated piece. Can play for them in the slot. Really good return man. I like that move for Cleveland. They franchise tagged David Njoku and then released Austin Hooper. I can't understand this move of the Titans because they also have Harrison Bryant. And when they signed Austin Hooper in the first place, I was really confused. And then they end up cutting him 2 years later. So I don't understand why you didn't just keep Njoku and play him because he's way better upside than Austin Hooper. So yeah, I don't really understand that move in the first place, but I like that they kept him with a tag because I do like David Njoku a lot as a player. And then Chase Winovich was acquired in a trade from New England, who kind of fell out of favor with the Patriots. Just they had a lot of pieces there, and they decided to get rid of him. But I do like this addition. Chase is a really good player. He's really good against the pass, not great against the run, but that's what he's going to be there. Is probably a situational pass rusher. Taven Bryan, whatever. I mean, he's a first-round bust. And then Anthony Walker's a solid re-signing at linebacker. Then we got the Pittsburgh Steelers. So they signed Haskins to a tender. He's probably going to compete for that job with, I'm assuming, obviously Trubisky, who they brought on a 2-year deal, which I didn't think was terrible. It's not a bad base year deal. I mean, it's like $7.125 million per year, and then it can be worth up to $27 million in incentives, which I think is a decent bargain for Pittsburgh. I think if they would have waited a little bit longer, they could have gotten somebody in the trade market, but I don't think they wanted to give up any assets. So I think it was a decent move by Pittsburgh. I would have liked to have seen Mariota here, but we'll talk about him tomorrow with Atlanta. So I'm assuming it's going to be these two and a rookie, like Matt Corral or Malik Willis or somebody like that competing for the job. They bring a Corafor back who's a really good run blocker, but has struggled in pass blocking. But I do trust this Pittsburgh staff to develop him, to continue to develop him. He had some great strides last season, and Pittsburgh has always been known for developing their O-line. And then James Daniels they bring in from Chicago. I thought was a really good get. He can play guard or center, really mobile, really agile, so I like that signing. Then they sign in Mason Cole, who's a nice depth piece at offensive line. And then they signed Miles Jack, which was a bargain deal, but I don't really understand because Pittsburgh's just throwing darts at inside linebacker. They already have Devin Bush, and they brought back Robert Spillane. So they have those three, and then they have somebody else there, which I can't remember off the top of my head. But they're just throwing darts at linebackers. This is a great move. I'm not dissing the move at all, but I mean they're just continue to just load up on the inside linebacker position. It's really interesting. And then they brought back Arthur Mollett and Akella Witherspoon at corner, which I thought was, they were solid signings. And then they bring in Levi Wallace, who I'm not really too high on, but I mean, they're going to lose Joe Hayden, so he's a decent replacement for him. And then they bring back longtime special teamer Miles Killebrew, and then they bring in Gunnar Olszewski, who's a former All-Pro punt returner. And then we go to the Bengals, who re-signed Brandon Allen as a backup, bring in Hayden Hurst, who's a good replacement for Uzama and has a higher upside. He's a more athletic player, but probably not as good of a blocker as CJ Uzama. And then you bring in the big boys. You're bringing Lyle Collins, who I'm really mad the Patriots didn't get, but whatever. Really affordable deal, too. Really good move by Cincinnati. Probably one of the best signings, bang for your buck in the entire free agency period. Alex Kappa, who's been a really solid starter and has really improved over the last 2 years for the Bucs, especially in pass protection. And Ted Karras, who can play either center or guard. Very versatile guy and is great in both pass and run blocking. They re-signed B.J. Hill, who they absolutely stole from the Giants last year. The Giants, man, what a stupid move to trade B.J. Hill for Billy Price. They re-signed Josh Dupois. They re-signed Eli Apple, who I know, everybody's we got toast in the Super Bowl. I understand, but Eli Apple really did improve last year. He had some really good moments. It's not the, worst move in the world, and I hear there's rumblings of them getting Stephon Gilmore, so Eli Apple might not even be on the field that much, but it's always good to have guys that are veterans with depth. So I don't mind the move. And then they franchise tagged Jesse Bates and Mike Brown and the Bengals team in general. If you do not re-sign this man, I'm coming after you. I'm coming after you, Mike Brown. You need to pay Jesse Bates. He's one of the best free safeties in the league. Just pay the man, please. Just shell out the money for him. You shelled out the money for Trey Hendrickson last year. Please just shell out the money for Jesse Bates. Please do it. You won't regret it. And then they bring back special teamers Michael Thomas and Clark Harris. So now we go to the AFC South, and we start with the Jags. They gave a nice deal to Zay Jones, who I've always been a fan of back to his days at Buffalo. I think he's a really solid possession receiver and is better than most of the guys they have there on the roster. And then you bring in Christian Kirk. So I don't hate this signing at all. I really like Christian Kirk as a slot guy, and I think he's going to be really productive for Jacksonville next year, and I think he's going to have a good rapport with Trevor Lawrence. But you paid this man $72 million over 4 years? That is ludicrous. Dude, I don't understand. Christian Kirk's agent, deserves a round of applause for getting him that deal because I don't know who else would have given this money. And it's kind of well, Jacksonville has the money so they can pay it. but I know you have the money, but don't overpay guys. Like, this is just a massive overpay. I'm not hating on the signing of Christian Kirk because I really do like Christian Kirk as a player. I'm hating on the amount of money he got because it is just insanity that they gave him that money. They re-signed Laquan Treadwell, who was actually really productive for them last season after really busting out in Atlanta and Minnesota as a former first-round pick there. They bring in Evan Ingram, who apparently they want to play slot receiver as a mismatch guy, but why don't you just play him at tight end because you have no one there, honestly? Like, I don't understand why they're trying to play him at slot, but just play him at tight end. Like, you have nobody there. Cam Robinson on the franchise tag, so this really means that, like, Evan Neal and Kem Ekwonu are really out for the number 1 pick, in my opinion, so it's probably going to be Hutchinson or Thibodeau. Spoiler alert for my next mock draft, which is coming out later this week, hopefully. They break the bank for Brandon Scherff, who I really like. This is a really good move, especially he's an upgrade over Andrew Norwell. And this offensive line is starting to come together. So you have Cam Robinson. You're probably going to have Walker Little or Juwan Taylor kick into that left guard spot with Brandon Linder, who's one of the most underrated players in the league, at center. And then you have Scherff, and then you have either Little or Taylor, whoever loses that right tackle spot. You re-sign Tyler Shatley, who's a decent veteran option. You bring in Falurunzo Fadukasi, one of the most, again, another underrated signing. Really, really good against the run. Doesn't really offer you much as a pass rusher, but probably one of the best run defending interior defensive linemen in the league. I really like this signing for Jacksonville, who could not play defense to save their life last year, except in Week 18 against Carson Wentz. And then you signed Foyesade Oluokun, which, again, I don't hate, but you had Miles Jack. And I know you were paying Miles Jack a lot of money, but you just shelled out $15 million a year to Foyesade Oluokun, who I think is a worse player than Miles Jack, in my opinion. Like, I know he led the league in tackles, and he's a really good cover guy, but, like, so is Miles Jack, and I think he's a better player. So why did you shell out the money for Foyesade Oluokun? Or why didn't you just keep both of them? Because then you would have had a nice, pass covering duo at linebacker. I don't know, man. I don't understand the Jags. And then Trey Herndon, who's a solid depth piece at corner. And then they signed Darius Williams, who I like. But, like, the way it seems, because they have Tyson Campbell and what's his face out there. And then they have, oh, man, I'm drawing a blank on the other guy. But then it seemed like they signed him to play slot corner, which is typical of, like, teams just because he's 5'6", but, like, he's not a slot corner, like he's outside, so it's going to be interesting to see what they actually do with Darius Williams there. Then we move to the Houston Texans. They re-signed Jeff Driscoll as a guy to bring into their quarterback room. Also Royce Freeman, who's kind of really flamed out after being in Denver. Dario Ogunbowale, who's a decent, scat back, plus, brings value on special teams. They re-signed Captain Chris Conley, who had a, decent season last year, and then also is contributing on special teams. They bring back Pharaoh Brown, who's kind of whatever at tight end. Same with Cedric Wilson, who's a former, I think he's second or first round pick, bust, tackle out of A&M. And they bring back Justin Britt at center, who was probably one of their better offensive linemen last year. And then they signed AJ Cann, who's a really underrated piece, I think, here. He's been a really solid starter for the last 2 years, graded really well for PFF. Like AJ Cann, he's really improved a lot and is definitely an upgrade on the offensive line for Houston. They re-signed Malik Collins, which I thought was a little bit pricey at 2 years, $17 million, but he is, he is versatile. He can defend the run. He's good against the pass rush. So be interested to see how he continues to improve there in Houston. And I will say Nick Caserio is doing a really good job of bringing guys that want to be there in that kind of like really gritty, tough culture, kind of like what Detroit's doing too. And then they also traded for Blake Cashman, who I really like, who's really underrated from the Jets. Good sideline guy, good against the run, and decent coverage. So it'll be interesting to see how Lovie Smith uses him. And they also brought back Camu Grugier-Hill and Christian Kirksey at linebacker. Camu was really good for them last year. I'm surprised that he was on the 1-year deal and not Christian Kirksey. But Camu also brings you value in special teams as well. They get Agbo Okoronkwo as kind of like this hybrid edge linebacker type. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, who I'm a big fan of, really underrated piece, can stop the run, can blitz a little bit and play coverage. So I think he'll be a versatile piece in that cover 2 scheme for Lovie Smith. They re-signed Terrence Brooks. At safety, they signed MJ Stewart, and they also bring back Desmond King, which I think is big. It'll be interesting to see if Lovie Smith continues to use him at slot corner or if we'll move him to like outside or safety because he's played all three in the past. Then we go to the Indianapolis Colts, and the big news of the day was that they acquired Matt Ryan via trade for a third-round pick. Like, Atlanta got less for him than they did for Mohamed Sanu, which is crazy. Rip Patriots, by the way, because they traded a second-round pick for Mohamed Sanu. So I think this is a really smart move for the Colts. They dealt Carson Wentz, who, had actually a pretty good season until Week 18, where he just flopped against Jacksonville. So I really, really like this move for the Colts. Matt Ryan, I think people think he was washed up last season, but you got to remember, he was throwing to Kyle Pitts, Russell Gage. He had Calvin Ridley for like 5 games, I think, Cordarrelle Patterson, and then after that, he was throwing to like Olamide Zaccheaus and like Christian Blake. Like, he had no one there, man. And Atlanta has no one there. Atlanta literally has Kyle Pitts and Cordarrelle Patterson as their top 2 options. Like, they have no one at receiver. Like, legit, their number 1 receiver right now is Olamide Zaccheaus because Russell Gage went to Tampa, who we'll talk about tomorrow. They re-signed Mo Alley Cox, who's an interesting piece of tight end with Jack Doyle retiring, is going to take over that number 1 spot. I like him for a decent, to have a, underrated, decent year. They bring back Matt Pryor, who's a decent swing tackle, might even play left tackle for them if they don't sign anybody else because Eric Fisher's not coming back. They traded for him from Philadelphia last year. Taekwon Lewis, who's a decent, rotational edge guy. They traded for Yannick Ngakoue, who I really like. Coming in here for the Colts, as Yannick Ngakoue's on his 5th team in 2 years, but Ngakoue is a really, really solid edge and had a really good season last year for the Las Vegas Raiders. Was almost Pro Bowl worthy, and they gave up Rocky Sin in that trade, and then they re-signed Zaire Franklin, who's a decent linebacker, and then they signed Brandon Fison at corner. And then we go to the Tennessee Titans, the number 1 seed last year. They re-signed Dontrell Hilliard, who gave them some good reps when Derrick Henry was out. They trade for Robert Woods, which I thought was a really underrated move. They didn't have to give up much because of his contract and his injury, but I think he's a really, really solid piece and going to fit really well in that scheme and be a really nice wide receiver 2 next to A.J. Brown. Wouldn't mind seeing them getting another piece, though, because I think that room's lacking. I like Nick Westbrook-Akine, but they don't really have much after that, so I'd like to see them add there. But they do add Austin Hooper, and they bring back Jeff Swain at tight end, which they really were struggling at last year because they're throwing out Michael Pruitt, Jeff Swain, and Ferkser. So I really like them bringing in an established number 1 tight end in Austin Hooper. They re-signed Ben Jones, who's a really good center, and they also signed Jamarco Jones as a nice swing tackle for them. And then they re-signed Harold Landry, which I could not believe they retained him because they were really tight on cap space. I've always been a huge fan of Harold Landry coming out of BC. Was that 4 or 5 years ago? And he absolutely broke out last season. Can't wait to see him continue his success. Really big Harold Landry fan. His speed to power is really incredible. And he finally put the pieces together this year and became really dominant. And then they re-signed Buster Screen, who's a decent cornerback depth and has a lot of experience playing with the Jets, Bears, a couple other teams. And then they bring back some special teamers in Morgan Cox and Randy Bullock. So then we move to the AFC West. And we move to the Denver Broncos. So they bring in the legend, the man, the myth, the legend. No, not Russell Wilson. Josh Johnson, who I think is on his 13th or 14th NFL team, which is absolutely nuts, to back up Russell Wilson, who they, traded for. And honestly, I covered this, in a video, a couple weeks ago. I thought it was fair value for him. I don't think they gave up too much, honestly. I mean, the first round pick this year is probably the biggest asset you're giving up in your second round pick, but hopefully those other picks next year are going to be in the mid to high 20s. And then Drew Lock obviously would flame out there. Noah Fant was probably your biggest piece you gave up. And then Shelby Harris is like, a veteran leader on that defense. They bring in Tom Compton, Calvin Anderson for more depth on offensive line. They bring in Randy Gregory, which I think a lot of people are underrating this Randy Gregory sign. Like, this is big. Denver had no edge after Von Miller left. And Randy Gregory, for as much trouble as he's gotten in with, marijuana and stuff in the past, Randy Gregory has really turned it on. And when DeMarcus Lawrence went down for the Cowboys last season, really turned up for them, and he was really, really good. So I'm really excited to see what Randy Gregory can do in Denver. They bring back Deshaun Williams and bring in DJ Jones as, solid run defenders there. They bring back Malik Reed also for a nice edge piece there. I really like him. He was really good in that 2020 season. Then I think he was hurt last season. And then they bring back Josie Jewell at linebacker and bring in Alex Singleton to kind of bolster that linebacker room. Then we have the Los Angeles Chargers, who they may have had the best free agency so far, bringing in guys. So they brought in Chase Daniel, as that veteran quarterback. They re-signed him. They re-signed Mike Williams, who finally broke out last season. 20 mil is a little steep. I would have thought it would have been like 15, but nonetheless, you retain a valuable part of your team. So, it's good either way. Gerald Everett, who I've always really liked, but I was hoping that Donald Parham would kind of, break out next year and like really get a chance to be that tight end one. But I think they're bringing in some insurance and maybe using some more 2 tight end sets. Christian Covington, they re-signed. I really like him. Really good, both against the run and the pass. One of the more underrated players in the league. Austin Johnson as that run-stuffing nose tackle. Sebastian Joseph Day, who can do a little bit of both, coming in from the Super Bowl champion Rams. And then they get Khalil Mack in a trade. Like, dude, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa are probably the best pass rush duo in the league. I mean, absolutely absurd. Like, good luck, AFC West tackles. Good luck. Good luck stopping those two. And then they get J.C. Jackson, who they got for a bargain, man. $16.5 million. I thought he was going to get closer to 20. Like, I could not believe that they got him for $16.5 million. Like, the tag for him was 16, and when I found out he got 16.5, I was like, how did New England not use a tag on him for $16 million? Like, what did Bill think he was worth? 14? Like, I don't know, man. I still don't understand it. And then they bring back 2 special teamers, but a hell of a get in both Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson. I mean, absolutely insanity for L.A. I mean, they're going to be really good next season. Then we have the Raiders. They signed Garrett Gilbert to a deal. It was kind of a, placeholder backup for him. Amir Abdullah and Brandon Bolden, who will probably contribute the most on special teams, although Brandon Bolden did have his best season last year as kind of that pass-catching back for New England when James White went down. Jakob Johnson coming over from New England as well as that fullback to replace Alec Ingold. Then they get Devontae Adams. This probably shocked me the most, besides this Deshaun Watson deal. I just could not believe that Green Bay gave him up. And then I found out that it was Devontae Adams that wanted out, and I was like, wow, that is even more of news than Green Bay trading him. And Devontae Adams said it was his dream to play for Las Vegas, but I wonder really if it was Devontae Adams just had enough of Aaron Rodgers or had enough of the Packers. The Packers got decent value for him. I mean, first and the second, way better value than Houston got for DeAndre Hopkins, and he got a deal worth $141 million over 5 years, which is nuts for Devontae Adams. I mean, he becomes the highest receiver ever, highest paid receiver ever in the NFL. So, yeah, this may be kind of out there, but I think dark horse MVP candidate Derek Carr. Just being honest with you, because Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, that's crazy, man. I mean, Devontae Adams is going to eat. He's going to absolutely eat in the AFC West. Then they bring back Max Crosby, who had his best season. I mean, dude, his pressure rate was absolutely insane. And I hope he continues that. And I'm rooting for him, man. He has a really cool story. 2 years sober. He had a lot of mental health issues with alcohol and stuff, and I'm just really excited to see a guy who's that good, who's giving back to the community, get his money. He's a really inspirational story. And then they bring in Chandler Jones along with him to kind of compete with the LA Chargers with that Mac Bosa duo. Now you got Crosby and Jones, and that's a really good duo too. And Chandler Jones is one of the he's been really underrated. He's been really, really good when he's healthy. So I'm really excited to see that duo in action. Then they bring in Bilal Nichols coming over from the Bears is a really good interior run stopper. And then they bring in a couple of corners, which they have really needed. They've really struggled at corner. And Anthony Everett, who really stepped up last season after all the injuries in Baltimore. And Rock Ya-Sin, who's kind of, he's had his ups and downs, but really going to fit that Patrick Graham scheme with that man coverage defense. And then our last team for this video, the Kansas City Chiefs, who re-signed the man, the myth, the legend, Chad Henne. Shout out to him for that play against the Browns in the playoffs a couple years ago. That was incredible. They bring in Juju, which they've kind of really needed a guy like Juju. They brought in Josh Gordon to kind of be that like physical guy last year, but Juju really gives them a nice like wide receiver 2 and will give them a chain mover and stuff. So I really like that move for Kansas City. As much as I hate to say it, it was a great move. And they didn't really pay him too much. They tagged Orlando Brown. I've talked about Orlando Brown in the past. I thought it was an overpay from the start when they traded for him, and then he wasn't really that good last year. The fact that he made the Pro Bowl was absurd, but he is better than most of the people you get out there, so it's good to bring him back. And then Frank Clark got his deal restructured as they re-signed. I think his deal was up, or they had a void year or something. They re-signed it, so. So that's big for them. I think Frank Clark, when he's on, can be really good, but he just hasn't been great the last 2 years. And then Justin Reed. I cannot say enough good things about Justin Reed. I know that means Tyrann Mathieu's gone, but I don't care. I really love Justin Reed as a player. He's been really underrated with Houston the last few years. He's been in purgatory. The fact that this dude slipped to the 3rd round when he was drafted was, I don't even know, man. I mean, Justin Reed could be a Pro Bowler next year. I'm really excited to see Justin Reed in this Kansas City offense, defense. Sorry. I think that really improves their defense. I think that's one of the bigger moves for them in free agency. But thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. Sorry that I was late on all this with being in Florida and stuff. But I'm really excited to bring you the NFC tomorrow, and then my mock draft later this week, maybe next week. Depending on just my schedule and stuff. But I do thank you guys for watching. I will also cover, more news that is coming out as well. So if there's signing tomorrow, a big signing tomorrow, I will throw that in there at the beginning, or maybe do a separate video and then, post my NFC free agency review. But I hope you enjoyed today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate all of you for watching, and have a great day, everybody. Peace.